Happy Monday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. I have got a really fun show for you coming up. We'll talk to our buddy John Stinchcomb, the former UGA All-American. John has had some interesting things to say about the Georgia offensive line, going back the last couple of times he's been a part of our programs here, DawgNation Daily included. We'll see what he thought after seeing another game from this group on Saturday, and whether Cade Mays was kind of rotated around a few different positions. Jamari Salyer getting a bit of a look. We'll get an update on John about his feelings on the offensive line. And I'm going to tell you why, after 2 games, I think that Georgia's actually in pretty good shape. Now, some people are going to say, well, BA, don't make too much out of Murray State. Don't worry, we're not going to do that. But I do think that thus far, to the extent that you can be, Georgia's kind of on schedule here for looking like the team we needed to look like, fans of the program do anyway, when it plays the more important game, starting September 21st against Notre Dame, and then everything that comes after that. We'll also have some fun at Tennessee's expense in the program today and talk about a busy weekend around college football and the SEC in particular. Really glad you're with us. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I am going to talk about pretty much exactly what all of y'all think I'm going to talk about, because some of you have already reached out to me on Twitter about this. Yes, I kind of was the engineer of the George Pickens hype train for a long time, and I really like what I saw from him on Saturday, and you better believe that we're going to address that in full measure. I also kind of beat you over the head a good bit last week with the whole idea of aggressive plays on defense being important. Maybe didn't see as much of that as I would have liked, or maybe you didn't see as much as you would have liked against Vanderbilt. There were more of that on Saturday against the Racers of Murray State, albeit an overmatched opponent. So we're going to talk about both of those things a pretty good bit here today, staying very much on brand as a part of DawgNation Daily. But let me begin it this way. Have you ever heard the phrase that it's hard to prove a negative? Have you ever heard that saying before? And what this means is, and I hate to go this way, but this is kind of where it's usually used. If your wife is dead, it's sort of hard to prove you didn't kill her. It's a lot easier to prove that someone beyond a reasonable doubt did kill someone than it is to provide definitive proof something didn't happen. It's just hard to prove a negative. That's kind of the reason why our court system is sort of set up the way it is. You have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone did do something, and that person doesn't have to do anything. That person, their legal counsel, can just say, hey, listen, you didn't make your case. We feel like we ought to go scot-free, and that's kind of the way the legal system is designed. However, I think the sports world kind of works the opposite. I think in the world of sports, it's actually fairly easy to prove a negative, and it's sometimes far more difficult to prove the positive. What I mean is we can look after a couple of weeks in the college football season, and we have some negatives that are determined. The Pac-12 is likely not going to have a representative in the college football playoff. Ugly performance by Oregon, ugly performance by Washington. You know, this is a conference right now. Shouldn't say that Oregon's performance against Auburn was ugly, but they lost the game after leading for most of the time. We've kind of proven that negative, that once again the Pac-12 is probably not going to have a playoff representative. Tennessee's a mess. They are not a legitimate contender in the SEC East after losing 2 games to lowly opponents. We don't know who the 4 national championship contenders are that are going to make the college football playoff. And we don't, as of yet, know who the best team in the country is, but we can start eliminating some of them that are not. We have proven a few negatives around the sport. With that in mind, after 2 weeks, the fact that we have not identified quite as many negatives yet for Georgia, I think overall is kind of a good thing. And I was saying this to our video audience a moment ago, that after a couple of weeks here of watching Georgia on the road at Vanderbilt, in Sanford Stadium on Saturday against Murray State, for the most part, I'm kind of satisfied with what I've seen. And some people are going to say, well, yeah, BA, it's still Murray State. It's still the Racers. This is still an FCS foe, and Georgia was a 50-point favorite. I get all of that. You have to grade on a curve. And yet even grading on a curve, I kind of feel like we're seeing some things from Georgia that we haven't seen a lot in the Kirby Smart era. Some of the things that Georgia did on this particular Saturday, they couldn't have done or certainly didn't do to virtually any opponent over the last couple of years. Let me start on the offensive side of the ball, and let me start with wide receiver George Pickens. And yes, I have believed, and I have spoken, and I have preached, and I've gone on and on and on about how important it is for Georgia to have a big-time playmaking wide receiver. Not just a guy who might make an NFL roster, but the kind of guy who could eventually be taken in the first round overall. That has been a very big deal to me, and George Pickens on Saturday had the look of being that guy. the diving catch that he makes. He finds his way into the end zone. This is a guy who just kind of has that look of maybe being able to do something pretty impressive. And to see him on Saturday getting a chance to exploit all that talent in front of the Sanford Stadium crowd, it was a pretty big deal for me, and it's the kind of thing Georgia just really hasn't had. Not to this level, not to this caliber, at least the potential that Pickens brings to the table. In fact, after the game on Saturday, Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, in speaking with the media, had this to say about that leaping full extension catch that Pickens made that led to a touchdown being scored not too long after that. Here is Fromm on his feelings on Pickens. Take a listen to this.
You was impressed by that Pickens catch as everybody else was?
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. That was awesome to see.
What does he bring to the offense, Jake?
Yep. Explosiveness. He's a big-time guy. He's a really good player, really good kid, and he needs to clean up some of the little things, some of the little details, and we're talking to him about that, and it's awesome, but I think he has a tremendous potential, and I hope he can go out and play better next week.
So Fromm says he needs to clean up some of the little things. Apparently that was an issue. You may have seen late in the game, there's the moment where he gets shoved out of bounds and kind of tosses the football back in the direction of one of the Murray State players. Apparently that was a little bit of a deal, so much so that you heard Fromm bring it up there, and Kirby Smart, when he was kind of asked to kind of give the glowing review of Pickens' breakout performance, he also kind of mentioned some of the same stuff. A little bit of a weird audio on Kirby here, but you should be able to make this out. Kirby, being asked about Pickens, kind of echoed some of the same things that Fromm said of, there are a couple of things we're still getting him to work on, even though he obviously dazzled with the catches that he made. And, by the way, another compliment coming Pickens' way from Smart here, too. Here is Smart on George Pickens.
George has stepped up and he's starting to become an overall player, meaning probably the most impressive thing he did today was a block on DeAndre Swift's long run. He did a great job going down and digging the safety out and sprung Swift. And when you can do that as a freshman, that's more impressive to me than diving and catching the ball. He's grown as a player. He's got to learn to control his emotions a little bit. He's very emotional. He's a passionate player. I don't ever want to take that away from him because I think that is what makes him who he is. But he's got to be smart and play within our system and understand that just because you make a play, you can't talk to the opponent.
All right, two things here I want to address with Kirby talking about Pickens right there. First of all, one of the things that I think potentially makes Pickens so valuable to Georgia and potentially as valuable as any of the 5 stars that Georgia has signed since Kirby Smart has been here, and goodness knows there has been a galaxy of them over the course of the last couple of seasons, is it's rare enough to find a receiver who has the skill set and the talent that Pickens brings to the table, but to have that player, and Pickens has that talent. He is that look of the Jerry Judys and the Justin Rosses and the wide receivers who've been amazing for some of these college football playoff and national championship teams the last couple of years. Pickens has that same kind of look when it comes to his overall talent and skill set. But to have that guy also, and I don't take this as coach speak, I think that Kirby Smart's being accurate when he says this, to have that guy also have the kind of mentality to buy into what Georgia asks of its receivers, I just think that's a pretty impressive package. And I don't have to tell you that not every receiver in the country that dreams of catching footballs and dreams of getting glory and dreams of having their face shown on TV all the time, not every receiver in this country, not every 5-star that's come up out of the woodworks of the last couple of years is going to be able to step in and fill in and do and earn that kind of praise from Kirby that Pickens just earned there. This gives him a chance to not only be the missing piece of the Georgia offense. Georgia needs a deep threat. Georgia needs someone to help extend the defense vertically and blow the top off a defense. But you don't want to do that at the sacrifice of what this program believes. It's sort of closely held beliefs, and apparently when it comes to Pickens, you're not going to have to do any of that. But let me also deal with the other part of what Fromm said there for a moment. He's got some stuff to clean up. Kirby Smart says he's an emotional player who needs to not let his emotion get the best of him when he's out there in the football field. I want to be very clear about something here. That, for me, is not a concern at all. I am not the least bit worried about that whatsoever. And the reason why is because when it comes to being a coach, and at this level, I obviously don't know what it's like to be a coach, but I certainly understand the idea of working with people and motivating people and getting the most and the best out of people. That's something that I feel like I know a pretty good bit about. And energy is a big part of the success quotient for any organization, for a college football team, for a business, for a school, for just whatever. The kind of energy that's in place. And I believe that when it comes to a guy like Pickens, or really any situation, it's a lot easier to channel energy than it is to conjure energy. In other words, take a lethargic person who doesn't have a hot temper or doesn't have an emotional bone in their body. It's hard to get that person to show the energy that they need to show. Whereas for someone maybe in Pickens' case, who, as Kirby Smart said, maybe a little emotional on the football field sometimes, as Jake Fromm said, maybe a little bit to clean up. I'll take that any day of the week. I'll take someone who's got energy, maybe channeled in the wrong direction sometimes, more than someone who just doesn't have the requisite energy to truly succeed. That's one of the reasons why I think Georgia fans ought to feel pretty excited about the situation with the offense. It was only Murray State, I get that, but Dogs have now scored 60-plus points in their last two regular season non-conference home games. All of a sudden, for this offense who, a lot of Georgia fans want to say, can it establish that extra dimension that it needs to truly compete alongside the Clemsons and the Alabamas and the teams that expect to play in the college football playoff? The presence of George Pickens through 2 games, targeted a lot on the road at Vanderbilt, a part of the game plan in a big way against Murray State on Saturday. The presence of Pickens here, I think, is a potential foreshadowing that when the games start to truly matter in November and December and maybe even into January, the Dogs may truly have the kind of offense that gives them a chance to go toe-to-toe with the Alabamas and the Clemsons of the world. And it's this kind of recruiting of a 5-star wide receiver that might eventually and indeed make all that happen. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us. Live on video today, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on the radio at noon, of course, as well, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we're available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Really glad to have you on a part of our program today. Let me do one quick housekeeping update, and I know I've gotten some Twitter messages on this in the last couple of days, and I apologize. So DawgNation Express, obviously it's still just as sold out as it ever was, and we've been in kind of a little bit of a holding pattern when it comes to the waiting list on this. We've got triple digits on the waiting list. A lot of you are saying, BA, when we're going to hear something about this. So here's what I can tell you, and for those who maybe haven't been listening every day for a while, what DawgNation Express is going to be is a big-time kind of luxury experience tailgate in Athens on Saturday, September 21st. You guys know the big game that's taking place in the Classic City there that day. We have a whole busload full of folks leaving from the Atlanta area kind of early afternoon, like around noon or so, and getting into Athens. Long day of tailgating, motor coach transportation on the way back to Atlanta after the game's over. It's going to be an incredible time, and as we predicted, it sold out in like 2 seconds. Well, a lot of folks said, well, what about waiting lists? What about other opportunities? What can we do here? And I know that we're kind of still in that holding pattern on that, but the good news is it sounds like we may have some resolution on kind of how many more people we can fit into this by the end of the day today. There's a lot of logistics that go into this. I'm really glad that's not my job. I'm really glad that's not what I do for a living. My job is just to have fun with all of you. So I'm thankful for that today, but hopefully by tomorrow's show, for those of you who are on the waiting list, I can tell you the next step on all this, and maybe by the time you and I speak again, maybe you've even heard from some of our DawgNation staff as we get ready for DawgNation Express coming up on Saturday, September 21st, one of the biggest events we're going to do all year long. It's going to be a gigantic luxury tailgate experience. I'm just really excited about the whole thing, and I hope to be able to fit in as many of you into this as I possibly can. I'm going to push for it to be as big as possible, but we got a couple of logistical things we got to work with to kind of get that to occur. All right, I'm going to talk to John Stinchcomb here in a moment. Before we get to that, let me go around the doghouse, brought to you today by our friends at Pella Window and Door. And I told you off the top that I feel like after 2 weeks, Georgia's kind of on schedule. I like what I saw from the offense on Saturday. I'm not that worried about the slow start necessarily. Defensively, I was really excited by what I saw. What was it? 6 sacks, 11 tackles for loss overall, and obviously there's that voice in your head, and probably some of our non-Georgia viewers and listeners who tune into DawgNation Daily saying, "Oh, BA, you better not be making too much out of a game against Murray State in terms of the pass rush being better." But here's the thing, and longtime Georgia fans will know this. Really, when it comes to getting in the backfield and wreaking so-called havoc, Georgia hasn't been doing that against any foe the last couple of years. So those numbers kind of matter to me a little bit, even if it came against a lowly opponent, and the fact that so much of it was generated by young players, whether it be redshirt freshman Azeez Ojulari, true freshman Nolan Smith playing for the first time in a real game there in Sanford Stadium, duly fielded Sanford Stadium now. That was something I thought that was kind of fun to watch, and I think an important next step for Georgia. In fact, Ojulari had this to say about what he thought Nolan Smith and his sack and a half and everything else that he was doing there on the field that day. He had a chance to talk about what he thought that brought to the UGA defense. Here's Azeez on that.
Oh, yeah, they're bringing the energy and the juice. Man, those boys come in, they work hard every week. So it was just like them coming out here, just seeing them play, they bring that energy, just hypes everybody else up. Just gets us going.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're bringing the energy.
So,
and the
yeah,
juice.
that's good stuff there from Azeez Ojulari on that. Of course, J.R. Reed, a little bit more measured. He's been around for a while. He's going to be a little more calm with some of the things that he says. And he liked some of the pass rush stuff that he saw from Georgia, but as he says, there's always room for more. Here's J.R. Reed.
Man, you can always improve on Havoc, man. But we did a good job. I'm pretty proud of the Havoc plays. I think we left some out there that we can create and let happen. But, we did a great job.
And if you're keeping track here, J.R. Reed may be a little less excited than Azeez Ojulari. Kirby Smart may be less excited than both of those guys, obviously referencing the opponent that Georgia played. Nonetheless, though, for me, it doesn't change the fact that I liked the pass rush that Georgia put on display. Here's what Kirby Smart had to say about it, though.
That's hard to judge. I don't know how many sacks statistically we ended up with. I'm not sure where it ended up, but I mean, obviously those guys were outmanned up front. They don't have the same caliber of guys to protect that other teams will play. But the game plan was to come in and play these guys a little different than some of the teams we've played like them in the past. Try to be aggressive and try to cover them and get up on them. They did a good job throwing and catching the ball. That's what they do for them. Throw and catch the ball. Our front was disruptive and control the run game. Tried to make it one-dimensional.
I'm reminded of what former NFL defensive end Chuck Smith said on our program last week, a guy who's coached up Nolan Smith on an individual basis and some others, when he said that he thinks that pass rush is a mentality, and that's the kind of mentality you have to have as a part of a program. And I think that Georgia put more of a pass rushing mentality on display on Saturday, and I thought it was a pretty good thing to be able to see. So we'll see how it translates the rest of the season. But for 2 weeks, more explosive plays on offense, more aggressive plays on defense, even with a little bit of a slow start against the Racers. I'm pretty happy with what I've seen thus far. I'll be curious to see if Georgia fans feel the same way. It's Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily. It's brought to you by our friends at Pella Window and Door. The Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. They're family-owned and operated, and they're also a national company, so you really get the best of both worlds. The resources that come from a national company, but also backed by a local service, which is just a great, great deal. And speaking of great deals, you can also get this, 50% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 48 months. That's through November 14th. A really, really good deal there. It's also Pella offers the best lifetime warranty, top-of-the-line equipment, and unparalleled expertise. A couple different ways for you to get in touch with our friends at Pella Window and Door. You can go to this website. It's pellasoutheast.us. That's pellasoutheast.us. Or you can give them a call in their Dunwoody showroom. The number is 404-445-2979. The number, once again, 404-445-2979. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, truly viewed to be the best. All right, we'll get John Stinchcomb coming up here in just a moment, but it's great to have you with us as a part of DawgNation Daily. All right, so John is going to be here in just a little bit. We'll get him squared away and ready to rock and roll here. Also, a lot of your comments kind of rolling in here, too, a little bit. And as I said before, I am curious to find out, are Georgia fans, are they okay with where this team is after a couple of weeks? For the most part, I kind of am. A lot of folks would have liked to see Georgia keep its foot on the gas a little bit more last week against Vanderbilt, maybe come under the block a little faster against Murray State, and I get all of that. But I think there's a way to kind of micro-analyze a lot of these kinds of things, cluster of bad plays at the beginning of a game, cluster of bad plays near the end of a game, and kind of make a little more of that than it really is. For the most part, I think Georgia's actually in a pretty good spot here through 2 weeks, so we'll give you a chance to weigh in on that. For now, though, you want to hear from John Stinchcomb. Let's get ready to talk to him right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Great to have John Stinchcomb as part of DawgNation Daily here today, and a lot we want to get into with John. And I guess, John, let me start with this, if you don't mind. First of all, hello to you. Hope you had a great weekend, and thanks for being a part of our program. And I want to hear from you on a number of subjects from the game, but one of the things you and I have had some interesting talks with the last couple times we've been together, whether it be the Marlowe's matchup this past Thursday or last week when you're on DawgNation Daily, your thoughts about the offensive line. We saw kind of an interesting rotation on Saturday, Cade Mays playing a number of positions. One point in time, even spelling Andrew Thomas at left guard. We saw Jamari Salyer get some action. We also saw this big offensive line against kind of an overmatched opponent. What did you make of kind of where this offensive line group is through 2 games here?
Well, what stood out to me first, and you mentioned it, is Cade May's versatility. His ability to play 3 different positions in the same game is impressive. Is an impressive feat. He starts off as a guard, moves out to right tackle, finishes up at left tackle. That's a lot of mental capacity as much as physical ability. So that was impressive to see. I thought it was probably good to see Jamari Salyer out there, let him get some reps. And he'll learn from the tape. I mean, he made some mistakes early. I think it was only 2 series at the beginning of the game where he played until there was some mop-up duty towards the end with a variety of players that also got some reps, including some pretty sizable names that you saw in recruiting at the beginning of the year. Xavier Truss comes to mind.
Yeah.
He got some tackle work. So across the board, it's hard when you're playing an inferior opponent, ability-wise, to evaluate how they look. But it's a good performance overall.
I will say this in terms of the evaluation against the inferior opponent. One of the things that certainly seems true once again after seeing Georgia on Saturday, and it goes back to something that also you and I have talked about, is these opponents that Georgia plays, and even some of the better teams this is going to be true for, they're not just going to stand there and get mauled by the Georgia offensive line, right? They're going to try to find a way to counterbalance the best they can. Most teams can't match the size. Most teams can't even really match the overall talent level. So, therefore, you've got to be more of a stick-and-move, quickness kind of response to that. And I do think some of the stuff we saw from Murray State at times when its pass rush was effective, that's kind of the direction that teams are going to go. They're going to have to try to find a way to be a little quicker against a Georgia offensive line that once they, get off their stance, get off the ball, then they're going to be looking to put you in the turf. Teams aren't just going to stand there and let themselves get planted by these Georgia offensive linemen, are they?
No, I think that's going to be a recurring theme throughout the season. Unless you get an opponent with a defensive front that can stand up to an average of 330 pounds. I mean, there's a reason why Georgia wants to lean on folks. They've got the horses up front to do that. But, when you face an opponent that's moving and slanting the front, they're bringing pressure, they're going to catch you a couple times. But the flip side of that is you're going to catch them too. And when you find those seams, they're going to be bigger than than the opportunities you get when you're just playing more conventional defense of best versus best. So, I think what you saw against Murray State, there was a couple times where they brought a pressure, they moved the front, and it caught Georgia in a little bit of a bad spot. But you also saw these huge seams that opened up when you're able to catch the defense in their movement. And you create a much bigger hole.
Yeah, absolutely. David Alford, watching our Facebook comment section, said when it comes to the overall valuation of Georgia, he says we're going to know more after 4 weeks than we do after 2. And obviously that's true because by then Georgia will have played Notre Dame. But we don't have the luxury of knowing that and how that game's going to play out now. But, John, as I said before you joined us, there are a lot of teams who've unfortunately found out some bad things about themselves. We don't know how good anyone is until we see them against better opponents. But in terms of knowing how bad you are, you can certainly find that out. And after 2 weeks, John, and I know it hasn't exactly been a murderer's row of competition, but I haven't seen all that much yet I think that makes a Georgia fan feel like you ought to be panicking about anything. I mean, what is your overall evaluation of kind of where things stand with this team through 2 weeks?
I'm amazed at the depth. I think you've got a number of players that are capable and eligible to contribute. That's not always the case. Usually there's some separation when you get behind your number one guy. When you bring in that reserve, you can tell a difference. I think the platoon effect that you see on the defense, you look at the outside linebacker position, you look at the number of guys that have contributed, whether in the star position or slot, nickel defender, third safety. There's a number of guys that are rolling through. Defensive tackle, same thing. So across the board, there's a number of guys that seem ready. Nolan Smith when he's coming in, he's a factor. When Ojolari and Anderson are on the field, they're factors. Jermaine Johnson, same thing. So it's just the depth stands out to me. Running back, wide receiver, just across the board, guys that are not just rolling in to get them experience down the road, but they're factors, and that's what jumps out early on. I think you still need to find a rhythm, find those 3-4 guys at the receiver position. You're identifying in those situations if it's 3rd and long, if it's a 2-minute drill against a superior or equal opponent, who you want rushing the passer, those kind of things.
Yeah, I want to talk to you more about rushing the passer in just a moment because I thought there were some interesting things to come out of that from Georgia on Saturday. First, though, let me tell you about my friends at Kroger. You know, pumpkin flavors are back at Kroger this fall, and I know we haven't quite had that fall weather outside yet, but you can start feeling like autumn inside your local Kroger. You can save on everything pumpkin-related, whether it be pumpkin spice coffee, pumpkin pies, even pumpkin-scented candles. You can get all that at Kroger, and it'll be sure to kind of get you going and get you ready for the fall season. That from a weather standpoint, I promise we'll be here at some point in time, but you can at least start feeling like fall by checking out your local Kroger right now. So, John, once again, the caveat is, hey, it's the opponent, your FCS. Even Kirby Smart mentioned this in his post-game press conference. But the fact that Georgia, I think the overall number is, 6 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. John, Georgia just wasn't doing that against anyone the last couple of years. The fact that Azeez Ojolari is bringing this, Nolan Smith is bringing kind of, as Azeez said, some energy there in that regard, some juice, I think was the phrase that he used. This, to me, is a big improvement for Georgia, and obviously you hope it translates in the games that really matter, but it's at least a precursor of what might be to come, and to me it speaks to the upgraded level of talent that allows you to upgrade your overall level of stats as well. I was really excited as a fan to see Georgia spend as much time in the backfield as it did on Saturday, even if it was against an FCS opponent. That was a nice change for the better, from my mind, when it comes to what Georgia had been doing over the last couple of seasons. What did you make of all of that?
I agree. I think you have better talent across the board. I also think they were probing the fence a little bit to see how the players would react when they were more aggressive. The play calling on the defensive side, they brought a variety pack of pressures that I was almost a little surprised to see them unveil against Murray State. Usually those games just turn into a vanilla fest offensively and defensively where you don't show much, but I like the fact that they were bringing some dogs, which are pressures with the linebackers, and moving that defensive front just to put some pressure on that secondary to see if they could hold up in man situations, which is kind of what you saw with the 60-yard touchdown in the first half. Is you put your defensive back in a little bit of a pressure situation, and Murray State was able to exploit it. So overall, I liked it. I like the fact that you're stressing your players in these early game situations, and I left the game feeling really confident that you've got more playmakers on this defense than we've seen. I hate to put a number of years on it, but it's been quite a while since across the board you feel like you've got guys that can make plays when you need them to.
And I want to be very clear about my opinion on this, and not everyone's going to agree, and frankly, not everyone has to agree. But when it comes to what you point out, that there were a couple moments on Saturday where Murray State was able to have some success with passing plays because Georgia didn't really have any safety help, and one missed tackle turns into a big gain. I'm not telling you I'm fine with seeing a Murray State football player, running down the field, but in terms of the trade-off for being a more aggressive defense, I'm fine with that there. In that regard, there is a trade-off that comes with all this kind of stuff. It's the same way with the passing game as well. I'm fine with the fact that if you putting the ball in harm's way, if you're throwing deep down the field, you're going to have an occasional extra interception here and there. That's just the trade-off you make for being aggressive, but it's the appropriate trade to make because it's the team that pushes the issue on both sides of the ball that ultimately is going to win more times than not. So, John, if against better competition, the recipe for Georgia's more of the same, a push to have more pass pressure that occasionally results in more big plays than Georgia allowed in 2018, when statistically speaking was very good in that regard. That's a trade-off as a fan that I'm kind of fine with. As a former player, how do you see that?
Well, I think the more reps you get at something, the more discipline you have. So you understand where you're weak. When you're in a pressure situation, you're attacking an offense and trying to force them into making quick or bad decisions that give you an opportunity to make a play on the ball, which every defense wants the turnovers and create more opportunities for their offense. They just have to know where their weakness is when you do that. I mean, the conventional wisdom is a vanilla defense is a safe defense. It's a slow burn, if you will. When you take those chances, you're sacrificing some of the soundness of the positions that you're in and the double layers of protection that you're providing for your players. And that's fine, but when you're aggressive and you get these reps like you do against Murray State of being more aggressive in the play calling, that's great reps for them. They see that, if you're covering a slot and they're running a slant route and you don't have over-the-top help, you're in a pretty tough spot, and you have to be aware of that. So I agree. I think that's going to be reps that pay off down the future when you're not able or choose not to just go toe-to-toe and run, your base man cover two behind it stuff against some of the teams that you want to be more aggressive against.
Let me do a couple quick things, and we'll get ready to let you go. I'm not going to do anything to throw water on the George Pickens hype after the game on Saturday. John, for months, and really for years prior to that, I was talking about Georgia's need to find itself that kind of potential first-round style, a five-star style wide receiver. I just think that's the game changer in the modern game. Clemson's had those guys. Alabama's had those guys. With all due respect to the guys that have been here for Georgia, Georgia also needed one of those guys of its own. I already thought Pickens could be that guy, and then you go ahead and find out that he's also a willing blocker, that he's the kind of guy that brings a tenacity to the receiver position that we usually reserve for guys who play other positions. I just have been really pleased with what I've seen from Pickens through 2 weeks. No catches against Vanderbilt, but they targeted him plenty, which means that he must be performing pretty well in practice. And then he showed off his prodigious athleticism against Murray State on Saturday. To me, this is an exciting player on a team full of talented, exciting skill players. Pickens, I don't think, takes a backseat to anybody right now. What'd you make of what you saw from George?
Yeah. Buddy, I saw the exact same thing that you did, in that he's living up to the hype. We haven't had that big, scary, long, lengthy playmaking receiver in a few years. We've had some great receivers, but none that fit the description that you laid out just a second ago. That really is the scary athlete that Pickens seems to be, man. The catches that he made, just the threats that he showed early on against Vandy, and again, this offense based on running. Also, you have to be a willing blocker, and some freshmen that come in that are wide receivers want to just catch the ball. That's not the way Georgia set up, and Pickens seems to fit right in with his willingness to get in that box and get nasty. He had a couple blocks on linebackers and safeties trying to fill that were impressive. Along with the other guys, I've seen some blocks from Landers that were equally as impressive, but the playmaking dynamic ability of George Pickens is pretty evident, and I'm excited to see more of it.
Let me squeeze in one more tiny thing before we let you go. And, John, we always appreciate your time. RT367, our YouTube comment section, is also mentioning, getting guys like Trayvon Walker involved and things like that. John, before we say goodbye to you, that is part of the value of playing a team like FCS, is that you do get a chance to showcase those guys in a big way. And it's not just Nolan. It's not just Pickens. Walker is potentially kind of an interesting piece in this defense, too. You really saw a lot of young players play for Georgia on Saturday, and that is the kind of thing that's going to be valuable later on this season, correct?
Yes, the reps that Nicole Dean was getting, the experience that Trayvon gets not only in special teams, but when he's coming in as that 5 technique, the head up or shade defensive end role for a guy who, he's a defensive tackle. Going to be 3 years from now when he's a senior or upperclassman junior that is going to be able to anchor as a 3 technique and still provide the pass rush. But his athleticism is undeniable, along with the rest of those guys that have gotten these reps. I love these games, the FCS games, where you get to see. I mean, watching Nakobe Dean run, you got to be excited about his future, and not only in coverage, but you can just look at guys on the hoof and say, I can't wait for him to develop and be that playmaker that he seems to have the ability to be one day.
John, it's always great to talk to you here as a part of our program each week, and obviously I'm looking forward to seeing you again on Thursday, the Marlowe's matchup. And folks who haven't checked out our Marlowe's matchup, boy, what a great time we have each and every Thursday. We're also going to be at the Marlowe's and Peachtree Corners coming up 2 Thursdays from now. It's Thursday, September 19th, previewing the Notre Dame game there that week. So it's 5210 Town Center Boulevard and Peachtree Corners. That's September 19th, starting at 6 p.m. This week, though, we'll be in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios. It's the Marlowe's matchup every Thursday. Come on by and see us 2 Thursdays from now at the Marlowe's and Peachtree Corners, and then every week here on the DawgNation video channels as well. It's fun to preview the upcoming game with you, John. I look forward to doing that with you again this week.
Yes, sir. It's going to be fun.
All right, John, we'll talk to you later on.
All right. Bye, guys.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, good stuff there with John Stinchcomb, and hope you're watching the Marlowe's matchup. We've gotten great reviews on that. John doing that show with us each and every week, and then a lot of you have been asking, I get this Twitter message a lot, hey, when are y'all going to be at a Marlowe's Tavern here this season? Our first Marlowe's event of the season is Thursday, September 19th. The Peachtree Corners location. Our first time being at the Marlowe's and Peachtree Corners. This is actually a fairly new Marlowe's there for that neighborhood, so it's one of the best, great neighborhood, great place to be. It's 5210 Town Center Boulevard in Peachtree Corners there at the Marlowe's Tavern on Thursday, September 19th. I am really excited about that. Let me also quickly tell you about my friends at MyBookie. A lot of you have kind of gotten in on that handicapping super contest they've been doing for the NFL. A lot of you have gotten in on some college football stuff there as well. We'll get into some of these games a moment ago, but a lot of palpitations with the folks who had some action down with MyBookie here this weekend based on the way that some of these point spreads were kind of working out. Hopefully you got it at a good price, whatever game you might be in on. But nonetheless, if you're thinking about a place to kind of get your action down on game days, my advice to you is my friends at MyBookie, because they're offering a great deal right now for DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers. You can get up to $1,000 first deposit bonus, or you can double your first deposit there with MyBookie. You just simply type MyBookie, type that into your browser, and then when you get to MyBookie, use the promo code DawgNation. It's all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG, promo code DawgNation. Get a big first deposit bonus up to $1,000. You can double it. Good stuff from our friends at MyBookie, but you got to go right now. You play, you win, you get paid after that. But for now, go find MyBookie, MyBookie. Use the promo code DawgNation, and then you bet, you win, you get paid. Boy, it doesn't get any easier or better than that. All right, a couple of SEC games to talk about here. I got patted on the back by some of y'all for my thoughts on LSU. Admittedly, I thought the Tigers' defense would play better in Austin than it did, but Joe Burrow is something we've been saying for a while, that Burrow had the look of being a quarterback that was going to be better in 2019 than he had been for most of 2018. A lot of people say, well, what made him different last year than Felipe Franks, who was kind of middling statistically but kind of got better as the season went along? Here's the thing about Burrow. Burrow had been at Ohio State before coming to LSU. That's a pretty good cachet for a recruit, which means he had some raw materials. Felipe Franks has never really had the kind of people in his corner vouching for him that Burrow had for his. There are a lot of folks who have told you that, after Haskins was going to be gone, they wanted Burrow to be that next quarterback at Ohio State, but he was going to have to wait longer than he wanted to. That's why he went to LSU. And he's throwing the ball all over the yard right now, utilizing this very talented crop of LSU wide receivers. Defensively, I think the Tigers get better over the course of the season. You can find a way to stop people, but your offense sort of is what it is, and right now what LSU's offense is pretty good. This is a legit contender for everything. They are still my pick to win the SEC West, and you better believe I think some folks in Tuscaloosa, Alabama were paying close attention to what LSU did on Saturday night. Not a great defensive showing, but a great win there in Austin with Texas just dreaming of the whole world. And LSU went out there and took it from them. Pretty impressive. A&M not so lucky going on the road to Clemson. This one was kind of all Tigers. A&M ends up covering the spread for those of you who care about that. Another game, though, where you don't necessarily see the best of Trevor Lawrence, which I do think is kind of interesting that through 2 games, we haven't seen a great Trevor Lawrence performance yet. Now, that's not going to change your opinion on him, but, I mean, we had, knuckleheads in the national media trying to tell us before the season began that this is the greatest quarterback prospect of all time or whatever weird hyperbole that's been tossed out there. I think even Urban Meyer on one of those Fox broadcasts was potentially guilty of saying that. Clemson may be the best team. Lawrence may be a reason why. But let's stop at the idea that somehow Lawrence is some sort of perfect quarterback. That in a head-to-head matchup with Georgia, that Jake Fromm couldn't outplay him. That in a head-to-head rematch with Alabama, even Tua Tagovailoa couldn't get the best of him this time. This idea that we are static with our rankings of quarterbacks and Lawrence is clearly the best, Tua is clearly the second best, Fromm's no better than third. There is still a lot of fluidity to all of this. So Clemson gets the easy win on Saturday, but not exactly a coronation for Trevor Lawrence Heisman bid. That's at least worth kind of tucking in the back of your mind for right now to see how that changes over the course of the season. Big story, though, may not be either of the 2 big games. It's probably the fact that Tennessee has lost again, and they did so in ugly fashion. Huge defensive breakdown late in that game where the secondary, finds a real hole, and BYU makes the big pass play that sets up overtime. They go on to win it. I'm obviously shocked that Tennessee didn't bounce back in a better way than they did. Now, they were on their way to a win before this happens, but I thought that Tennessee would be a focused football team. I thought Tennessee would be a determined football team, the kind of team that at least for 1 year would show some fight and try to prove that the Panthers loss, the one they suffered at Georgia State, was not the definition of who this team is. It could just be that Tennessee's incapable of doing this, and this is where it starts to get a little nasty for Pruitt. As I said before, Philip Fulmer is a careerist. Fulmer pushed Johnny Majors out the door at one point in time. He has always been about navigating workplace politics to his benefit and to his advantage. The fact that he hired Pruitt, I don't think that's going to stop him from trying to participate in whatever kind of cloak and dagger measure he has to make sure, like a cockroach, he survives whatever apocalypse is coming to the Tennessee program with Jeremy Pruitt here. I don't think that Pruitt's in danger of losing his job here this season, but as I said last week, his knees have been taken out from under him. For the most part, in terms of his stature as a leader of this program, I think he's essentially been emasculated here. This is the kind of guy that cannot seemingly direct Tennessee to wins. They can be competitive and they can bring in some recruits, but they can't go out there and finish games with wins. It's a tough situation for Tennessee right now for sure. A couple other things to get to here. I think Nick Saban had an interesting statement going back to his team's win against New Mexico State on Saturday. Obviously, that's an overmatched opponent. Alabama's like a 50-point favorite. And he was asked after the game if this is the kind of game he likes to play, does he see value in playing in those games? And Saban kind of comes back and has one of his big-time rants about how they have a hard time getting teams to want to play them. Admittedly, Alabama has followed Georgia's lead with some of its non-conference scheduling for the future. They're scheduling more homes and home and series like that. But for the most part, Saban's been fairly comfortable playing these kinds of games in the past. He has vouched for a 10-game SEC schedule. He says he wants 2 non-conference games against Power 5 opponents. So he's singing the song now of that being what he wants to do. But kind of an interesting rant when it comes to Nick Saban. And the really bad news for the SEC East continues as Kentucky quarterback Terry Wilson apparently dealing with a pretty big injury here. Wilson, was a guy that I think Kentucky kind of wanted to rally around, and Mark Stoops and Eddie Gran, the offensive coordinator, even though they lost, Benny Snell off last year's team, I think they felt pretty good. Vasier Smoke and others, I think they felt pretty good about some of the offensive talent they've had in place. But the Wilson injury for Kentucky is going to be a pretty serious one. So other than Georgia, Florida gets a week 0 win against Miami. There has been a lot of bad news here in the SEC East to start the season. Kentucky the latest on that. will make that your SEC through. And let me turn my attention back to Georgia here for a moment. Let's do our Heisman hierarchy. It's brought to you by Kroger. And I guess in between, the Georgia guys that we think of as contending for this award right now, DeAndre Swift was the guy that we highlighted in this spot a week ago. He had the better overall statistical game in comparison to Jake Fromm. On Saturday, I think you probably see Fromm kind of emerge in this discussion in a way that probably puts DeAndre Swift towards the back seat. And one of the things that's going to be a challenge for DeAndre Swift's Heisman candidacy is the fact that Georgia right now, and I mentioned this as part of our DawgNation postgame show on Saturday night, Georgia is pretty successfully and pretty effectively utilizing 4 running backs right now. You found a way to get some receptions for James Cook. You gave him a couple carries. Brian Harry and Zamir White, they find the end zone. White for his first time, Harry for the second time in as many games this season. DeAndre Swift does get 2 touchdowns, but he's sharing the load right now with a lot of running backs. That means in terms of a Heisman candidacy, that might take a back seat. Now Swift, to his credit, he's going to be about team success. I don't think he's going to be too worried about that, but to the extent that you pay attention to the Heisman hierarchy here presented by Kroger, Swift probably does take a back seat there in that regard. As far as Fromm goes, what potentially helps him is the emergence of some of these young guys, not just Pickens, who we've talked a lot about, but Dominic Blaylock, who catches a touchdown late in this game, and others. This is kind of an interesting collection of good young talent. White at running back is a potential weapon for Fromm to utilize there as well. And so the Heisman candidacy of Fromm, to the extent that it's being propelled, may be being propelled by some of the young offensive talent that's around him right now. In fact, Jake Fromm discussed that after the game on Saturday. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, man, it's awesome, man. Come out, execute the offense, let those guys go and have experience, because a lot of guys can help our team. They can help the team through practice, pushing the defensive guys and pushing the older guys. And also, you never know when your number's going to be called and who's going to have to play. So it's an opportunity for everybody to go out and get better.
And those freshmen.
Yeah, indeed it is. An opportunity for everybody to go out there and get better. And on Saturday, that's what some of those young guys did, and they'll help Jake Fromm as he moves towards a Heisman candidacy, hopefully as the season progresses. Our Heisman hierarchy, it's brought to you by our friends at Kroger. And, of course, as we said before, pumpkin flavors are back at Kroger. You can get everything you need on that there this fall, whether it be the pumpkin-flavored coffee or the pumpkins that are on sale. Get decorated for Halloween. Get the entire fall season rolling right there at Kroger. It's great to have them as part of our Heisman hierarchy every Monday here on DawgNation Daily. All right, let's get ready to wrap things up here as part of DawgNation Daily here today, and we'll do so in style. Gator Hater Updater, how about 1,045 days? That's how long it's been since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. A great thing to think about, and certainly an exciting thing to pay close attention to. So good stuff there with the Gator Hater Updater, 1,045 days. Also, stay close here on DawgNation throughout the week. Kirby Smart press conference comes up today. We'll have video coverage of that. So make sure you subscribe to the DawgNation YouTube page if you have not already. Get subscribed to that, and you'll be ready to go with all the player interviews post-game. Kirby Smart press conference here on Monday. And, of course, we said before, we got Marlowe's matchup coming up on Thursday. A lot of really fun stuff throughout the season here. So stay close to DawgNation.com, the forum at forum.DawgNation.com, DawgNation on YouTube, and, of course, back here tomorrow morning once again for DawgNation Daily. Y'all have a great day, everybody. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, air, heating, plumbing, electric. Of course, they take good care of you on all of those fronts here when it comes to R.S. Andrews. We appreciate Dari and the whole team there. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. And heat index in Georgia today is supposed to be above 100 degrees, just miserable. I'm so tired of all this heat. Y'all, I'm just sick of it. I'm not going to bore you with weather talk, but I am sick of that. And that's why when I go home and yesterday afternoon after kind of a long weekend, kind of get settled in, watch a little football, I love to feel that air conditioning hit me on the face. When you're sitting in your own home, if your air conditioning is not quite hitting you on the face in the same regard, you need the R.S. Andrews a cool down there to happen in your own house. So find them online. You'll get the R.S. Andrews $99 Smiley tune-up. They'll get your system back to factory fresh specs. You can check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right, we're going to do a couple of minutes worth of comments here, and then we are going to kind of get it ready to roll on. I know a lot of you said on Friday that we were kind of short with our comments. The problem is I've set some of y'all up to think that we are going to do this till 11:30, 11:45 every single day. We really got to be off the air by 11:15 or so every day. Our buddy Connor's not here on Monday. That gives me a few additional responsibilities. So we'll have to pay kind of close attention to to all of that. But we'll take a good number of your comments here as a part of our program here today. Nager Yank says, "Hey, BA, do you still think Tennessee is Georgia's toughest opponent?" Now, I never said that Tennessee was Georgia's toughest opponent. I've said that Auburn was Georgia's toughest opponent throughout the entirety of the season. That's kind of always been my thing there in that regard. But Tennessee right now, not as good as I thought they would be, admittedly. Nick Lurch says, BA, your thoughts on LSU, I believe, might just be right. Bama is going to have their hands full with them. Now, I do believe that's true, for sure. For sure. Gregory Nowak says, a nice, cool weather here in Minnesota. Listen, Gregory, I am jealous of you on that. I am quite jealous of you on that. So I'm glad that you're enjoying some nice early fall temperatures there in Minnesota, though. Zenti Zelo Allen says, I'm happy Malik Herring got his act together. He's a difference maker in the run game. Tyler Clark played great in the run game as well. And, yeah, I know that, I won't pretend to know exactly everything that's been going on with Malik Herring, but Kirby's been asked about him a couple times. I've had kind of short, cryptic answers on that in a couple of instances. So, yeah, obviously I think Malik Herring is potentially a pretty big part of this defense. It was nice to see Clark in the backfield the way that he was on Saturday. But definitely you want to have Malik Herring feel like he's a big part of this thing. So hopefully that will continue. Wyatt Fielden says, who was your MVP this weekend? So I said on our DawgNation postgame show, for as excited as I was about Pickens, I'm probably still going MVP for DeAndre Swift just because he set the tone early, and it's been kind of nice to see after 2 games, after all the talk about Zamir White, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody, after all the talk about Brian Harrion, and I'm certainly as guilty of that as anyone, a lot of talk about James Cook, which some of you are quite guilty of. It's kind of nice to see DeAndre Swift saying, hey, for now, when it comes to this running back pecking order, the new boss is the same as the old boss. So he's definitely set a tone here over the last couple of weeks and done so without having to be used an awful lot. So I'm probably going MVP for Swift, but you could certainly make a lot of cases for a lot of other guys there as well. David Alford asking about Julian Rochester. That's one of those guys that, whether it be an injury situation or whatever, that you're kind of left to wonder where things stand with him. That's certainly a fair question to bring up. Matt Rukavina says, breaking, he thinks that Tennessee is still going to be singing Home for the Holidays. That's been kind of one of Matt's funny jokes, and yeah, probably so. Robert Barnes says, right now, we are our toughest opponent at practice every single day. And yeah, to a certain extent, that's true. And I know it's always kind of confusing of, well, how much can you really take from a game against a Murray State, against an opponent that's kind of overmatched? How much can you really do that? I think you can take some. It'll obviously be better to see Georgia playing against an FBS foe. I agree with the critics of Nick Saban. I know New Mexico State's not FCS, but I agree with those who say that overmatched games don't add a lot of value to college football. I agree with that. But I think you saw some things from Georgia on Saturday that were probably better than what you had, what you'd seen from Georgia in really any kind of game the previous couple of years. So do that with a grain of salt, I guess. Think about that. Randy Hall about Isaiah Wynn. Yeah, Wynn looking really impressive. I know he's glad to be back on the football field with the Patriots after being injured a year ago, and he certainly seemed to make the most of his opportunity last night in the win over the Steelers. That was kind of a nice thing to be able to see. Travis McCullough says, after that game A&M played Saturday, they won't be as much of a challenge. I don't know if you want to grade them too harshly for going on the road at Clemson and losing by a couple touchdowns. Probably, deserve to be more than that. But, that's a tough spot. And coming to Sanford Stadium in November is a tough spot there as well. I mean, A&M's going to play among the toughest schedules in the country. They're going to have some losses. But I don't think you can let their losses, however many of them come, whenever they do happen, I don't think you can allow those losses to kind of cloud your overall perception of that as being a really challenging game for Georgia. I mean, defensively, A&M was able to do some things with Clemson on Saturday. The one problem with A&M is they have no running game right now. And to be a real threat against the LSUs, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the other teams they're going to play, they got to find something on the ground, and right now they don't have that. Mark Godfrey says, did you retire Eddie? No, Mark, I got 2 confessions here. I forgot to put Eddie on the desk here today. The other confession is I forgot to change my shirt. I'm wearing just like a generic, random shirt. The reason why is because I've got AJC Falcons news now later on today, and I don't wear UGA gear on that, so I bring some other clothes to wear. It's been a long time since I've worn anything that wasn't red and black on DawgNation Daily, but I just forgot to put the other thing on before the show started today. So, yeah, I made kind of two blunders there in that regard. No Eddie, kind of a random shirt. That's my bad in both regards there on that. Somebody on Facebook also mentioned the situation with Kellen Mond. Not a great game for Mond, admittedly. And obviously I think A&M fans were hoping for a lot more than that. Brian McPhail says, is there any good Falcons news? Brian, as of today, I don't believe there's going to be a whole lot of good news to deal with there. And unfortunately, I don't much believe so. Green Soldier says, BA, what are your thoughts on LSU gassing out in the second half? Do they have a depth issue? Seemed like they couldn't rotate a lot. When they did, it hindered their ability to stop Texas. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you take away from that, Green Soldier, is that, Georgia has not had those kind of like cramping issues in the last couple of years. I think it does speak to Kirby Smart's attention to detail, and I know that LSU was dealing with some of that, and it was hot even at night in Austin. I think it was 100 degrees there. So, it's not, it's not impossible to understand how you could have been dealing with some of that kind of stuff. But LSU was probably dealing with more of it than you would like to have seen, which I think speaks to the hydration efforts that Georgia's been going through throughout the week. You're not going to see that kind of stuff at Georgia the way that Florida State blamed that in part for their collapse against Boise State. And as you said before, the LSU defense dealing with some of that against Texas. Luckily for Georgia, that's not a huge concern right now. Breda Pest Management, a really good point on YouTube. We did talk about this in our post-game show on Saturday, but no one's mentioned this here today. Mel Tucker, very impressive 2-0 for Colorado, getting a win over Nebraska. It was a home game that, much like Vanderbilt for Georgia last Saturday, probably felt like a road game for the Buffaloes because it was like 70% Nebraska fans in the building. So they traveled in a big way. Boulder's kind of a destination city, much the same way that Nashville would be for folks here in the Southeast. A lot of Nebraska fans. They have a history of traveling with their team a lot. And Colorado still found a way to get the win. I think the story here is not just Tucker as a head coach, but right now Jay Johnson looks like a pretty good offensive coordinator for Colorado too. So that's not a bad thing to be able to see. Also, I noticed that Georgia's opponent for this week, Arkansas State, blew out UNLV on Saturday too and kept it pretty close with SMU. I know they've had a terrible situation with their head coach whose wife recently passed away. They've had some off-field concerns, but on the field, Arkansas State's actually played pretty well. Nice here from Big Country 13 on YouTube, who says, me and my wife enjoyed our first game ever on Saturday. I just retired from the military, and we can't wait to do it again. Well, Big Country, thanks for your service to our country. Congratulations on your retirement. I'm really happy to know that you had a chance to enjoy being in Athens on Saturday. That's a really cool thing to be able to hear. Byron Dean Butler says, BA not thinking about Hazelwood anymore. And y'all know, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about Jaden Hazelwood. And I believe that Hazelwood's going to end up being probably a really good receiver. And the time we spent talking about him was with good reason because Georgia needed a player of his caliber. But some things have a way of working out on their own, and I believe that Georgia is in really good shape with Pickens right now. And Pickens, from a personality standpoint, from a playing profile standpoint, looks to be a very good fit for UGA. GB2 says, any news on Mike Bobo? Is he still coaching? How's his health? So I think his health is good enough to be back coaching again. I think the problem right now is the Rams just aren't doing very well. They've had some problems on the field, hopefully from a health standpoint. I don't 100% know, but I do believe that Bobo is back coaching again. In fact, I know that he is. So I hope that he's doing well from a health standpoint, but on the field, Colorado State hasn't done all that well. GB2 also says, how many points does Georgia need to beat Notre Dame by to put the fear in everyone going forward? My prediction would be 34-13. I think it would be the kind of score that would get some attention. I think you may be right about that. Dimitri Sullivan says, am I the only one who thinks that Maryland may win the Big Ten? Yeah, but that victory for them over ranked Syracuse out of the ACC. They have Penn State in 2 weeks. That will tell a lot. Yeah, Loxley's done a great job with that program right now for sure. And Enrique Murillo also asking about Eddie. As I said before, yeah, I forgot to put Eddie on the desk today. I also forgot to change my shirt. I'm wearing just kind of a generic shirt for today, too. So I have to admit I made an error there in 2 regards. A couple more minutes of comments, and then we're going to have to get ready to get off of the air here today. Let's see what people are saying on Facebook. James Crump says that he thinks that Pickens has more upside than Hazelwood did. Yeah, I won't pretend to be the kind of scout who's going to make that statement one way or another. All I can tell you is that Pickens, as willing a blocker as he's proven to be, lots of examples of him being very physical for Georgia thus far. I think that Georgia's in great shape because his ability to be a dynamic playmaking receiver, that's been well documented now based on the viral video that came out in August, the stuff that he did on Saturday. I think that's well documented here at this point in time. And as far as what Kirby mentioned about him being, quote, emotional or, from saying that he had some things he's got to clean up or whatever, I said this during the regular broadcast, I'd much rather try to channel energy than conjure energy. I can't get a guy off the couch. I can't do that. No one can. But a guy that's going 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction or maybe going 100 miles an hour running someone over, I can say, okay, take that energy and point it in this direction. It's just a lot easier to do. Anyone who's ever led people, anyone who's ever been a coach, anyone's ever been a manager can tell you that. Energy is it's easier to channel energy than it is to conjure energy. Pickens has got the energy. Maybe at times he lets it spill out in the wrong direction, but you can fix that. You can't get a guy off the couch, though. You just can't. Dwayne Dyer says, wouldn't it be karma to see Oklahoma versus Alabama? Certainly, and you potentially, could have some of that with Fields at Ohio State, too. Justin Johnson asking about DJ Daniel. The honest truth is, Justin, I don't 100% know. You're going to have to – Jeff did do his freshman report, though, at DawgNation.com. So, freshman, which includes newcomers, you can kind of check out his player participation stuff there on that. Kevin Drummer says, by what game do the rotations get shortened at most positions? I think that's a pretty interesting question, Kevin, because there's a chance when it comes to some of the running back stuff, they may be really trying to kind of, go with this for a good bit during the season. They may be, they may try to keep these four guys involved. At least as much as they possibly can. I believe at some point in time at running back, you got to find your three you're going to contribute most, and maybe even your two are going to contribute more than others. Four would be a pretty deep bench there in that regard. But at the wide receiver position, at least, one of the reasons why sometimes the Georgia receiving stats get diminished a bit, for the individual receivers, is because of how often and how frequently they cycle those guys in. So that's gone on for most of the last 2 years. I'm guessing that continues here in 2019 as well. And with Eli Wolf, who emerged the tight end position the way that it certainly looked like he was doing, all of a sudden now you have more of a room for a rotation there at tight end. Georgia plays two tight ends a lot, so you don't have to necessarily take somebody off the field quite so much. But there's that thing too. So, Kevin, to kind of give a longer answer to a simple question, in some respects, I don't know that some of these rotations are going to get shortened all that much. Kirby likes to play a lot of players. He does. Dante Rivers says, I think Pickens is more of the player we needed. Yeah, Dante, I'm not going to even make the comparison with the other recruit so much on this, is just saying that when you see what Pickens looks like on the field through 2 games, he looks like a Georgia version of an explosive 5-star receiver. You can't just be, a glory hound. You gotta be able to do the hard work stuff too. You gotta do some of what, that's what one of the things that J.J. Holland was so good at a year ago. In addition to being a pretty good guy of going up and getting the football, Holloman cleaned clocks on some of those DeAndre Swift long runs a year ago, Kentucky in particular. Pickens can do some of that for you right now, so that's a nice thing to be able to see. Good comment, though, Dante. Steve Schiavini says, we still didn't cover that monstrous line versus Murray State. No, that's true. Georgia was a 49-point favorite, didn't cover that. That's probably fair to say. However, I don't have too much to nitpick from Saturday. And I'm not as worried about slow starts as some other people are. That's one of those things that when a bunch of stuff gets clustered together, near the beginning of a game or near the end of a game, I think the media sometimes has a habit of kind of turning that into a story, connecting a narrative with things that aren't necessarily connected. Getting fooled by randomness is, I think, something the media is guilty of from time to time. And, when it's 7-7 after one quarter and, 35 unanswered in the second quarter, I don't think you have a ton to worry about necessarily about a slow start there, although I do know that some people did mention it. Antoine Middleton says, y'all do realize that Hazelwood and Pickens have the exact same stats this past weekend, right? Yeah, my thing is not to talk down on the player that didn't come to Georgia. I've got no beef with him whatsoever. All I'm saying is I'm happy with the guy that Georgia got. Winston Mock also bringing up James Cook as saying that he sure does look good. Yeah, right now he does. Right now he does look like a guy that's going to be a part of this offense. I love the way that Georgia threw to him on Saturday. You find a way to get him a couple nice carries, but really throwing him out of the backfield, for those people who wanted James Coley to add some new wrinkles. Now, throwing to the running backs isn't necessarily a new wrinkle, but getting the most and getting good use out of a talented player like Cook is an example of that. I like to see that. Chris Branham. BA, I trusted you and took the under for the game. You can repay me my $5 by end of day today. Yeah, unfortunately, that under did not cash. No, it did not cash. Defensive score didn't help on that, although I was glad to see it. But, yeah, the under did not crash. Laura Klein says, I'll quote BA, hear me now, believe me later, Patriots draft from. Laura, that's a pretty good impersonation of me, and kind of an interesting pick there as well. David Hill says, kind of continuing the comparison between the two receivers, and that kind of stuff's going to go on, I guess. Let me go back over here. Somebody also mentioned Chris Smith, who's involved in a lot today. Tom Gross says, Chris Smith can tackle. Yeah, Tom, for Smith not to be all that big of a guy, he's never had a problem playing physically, and he's one of those guys that you root for because we've had a chance to interview him a couple times and, met him, a couple times. He just comes across as a really hard worker, a guy who's certainly tried to make the most of his opportunity, and so that's it's a great thing to be able to see, and I was glad to see him on the football field as much as we got a chance to see him on Saturday, for sure. Let me do a couple more minutes worth of comments, and we've got to go. Mo Morris says it's 75 in San Diego today. Mo, you're killing us with that. You make us jealous for sure. Enrique Murillo says, B, what do you want to see in week 3? That's a really good question. What do you want to see more of in week 3? I mean, I'd love to be able to see the numbers that were put up in terms of the overall, the tackles for loss and the sack. I'd love to see that maintained for another week, and I think that'd be a nice step in that direction. Also, for Eli Wolf, who really was catching that football on Saturday, was that kind of was that a one-off performance, or is that the kind of thing he's going to do all season long? Go out and show that against Arkansas State on Saturday too. So I'm sorry it's not a new, different answer, but just finding a way to maintain two of the interesting aspects of the game on Saturday, I wouldn't mind seeing that. Wouldn't mind seeing that. Matthew McGahee, had a chance to see him on Saturday. Matthew, thanks so much. Good to see you there too. John Snook says, how about more quarterback pressure on Saturday? I mean, from my standpoint, obviously you'd always want more, but I didn't see a shortage of that this past week. Preston Brown says, how about no penalties, playing clean? That's certainly a fair answer. David Hill says, Blaylock. Yeah, nice to see Dominic get in there and get himself a touchdown. Bruce Hucks, this is really funny. He says, talk about Pickens putting his arm around Kirby after the flag. So Kirby's kind of quickly becoming one of the more giftable coaches out there. So Pickens puts his arm around him, and Kirby takes his hand. One of y'all sent that to me on Twitter. It may have been Bruce. But, Kirby just takes his hand and, takes it off of his arm. It's kind of a funny thing. I guess it's easy to laugh about that. But that's some of the stuff that I'm sure they want to clean up with Pickens there a little bit. But I'm not going to get too freaked out about anything like that. I'm just not. What else? All right, let me do one more on Facebook, then we got to go. Joel Moody says, I think the starters need to play the 3 full quarters against Arkansas State in order to build continuity and stamina for the Notre Dame game. I think the thing about that is, I think the word starter is kind of an overused word with Georgia just a bit because of just how many guys they do rotate on a regular basis. And starting, sometimes just is dependent on the kind of formation Georgia wants to be in to begin a game. They're making a lot of these wholesale changes. Kirby's one of those guys that likes to play a lot of guys. And I do think it helps team morale overall. So, Georgia scored 60 on Saturday. There were some people who I think legitimately wanted to see Georgia score 100. And so, there's always going to be some of that. But in terms of getting ready for what's going to come on September 21st, there's no doubt that's a big issue. And I'm not going to lie to you. I'll be glad to be able to put a couple of these lesser-than opponents in the rearview mirror and start talking week after week about games of true, legitimate consequence. But I wasn't unentertained by what I saw on Saturday. I also need to say this before we go. Really happy to see the honor for Coach Dooley. I thought it was a cool moment, and I thought it was nice to be able to put that at the forefront for a lot of younger fans who may not have known the Dooley era. this was a substantial figure in the history of Georgia football and Georgia athletics in general, as the athletic director as well. Huge impact on other sports too. So I thought it was a nice moment, a good day for him, and great to be able to see him honored and celebrated on Saturday for UGA. That was kind of a nice thing. Let me also say this on the way out the door. Our friends at the AJC, they got you covered for Atlanta News Now. You can, of course, always get that at ajc.com. Make sure you make sure that you kind of get that ready to get up and rolling. Of course, weather, a big thing there. Huge heat, intense heat coming up today. That's worth paying attention to. Also, 4 crew members are missing after a cargo ship capsized near St. Simons. You may have seen some of the pictures of this online. Kind of a wild scene to see the ship turned over like that. But obviously, rescue efforts ongoing and continuing with that. You can keep up with all your Atlanta news now at ajc.com and check in throughout the day to kind of find out what's going on. Also, please make sure that you tell our friends at R.S. Andrews hello. You reach out to them online at rsandrews.com. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. You can find all of that, and they can get your systems, whether it be your air conditioning, your water heater, anything like that, they can get you back to factory fresh specs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, and they take good care of you. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily once again. We'll look forward to speaking to you then.